From the home offices of Ash and Flo, this is Unbillable Hours, a podcast about professional services marketing. Stick around to listen to our insights, tips, and best practices to improve your firm's marketing and even your career.
And I say welcome to this new episode of the Unbillable Hours podcast. Which is a first. We're actually recording this as a live session. We have a few guests here. We'll see if there's going to be some questions and discussion maybe in the chat. With us today is, so besides Ash and myself, is Luk Smeyers. Welcome, Luk. From the Visible Authority. Those of you who have listened to previous episodes know we've had him on before and learned that Luk has quite a few interesting things to say and lots of stuff we talk about, but he says so from the practice leader / consultant perspective. So we thought we'd bring this combination of views back to you. And so this podcast episode, I think, will explore trends and topics.
I mean, Flo, let's just be honest. We basically, sold this as Bizdev 2022.
Yeah,
and that is essentially talking about like marketing and sales coming together
from the two angles and the two perspectives. Exactly. Thanks. So the way this will work is we have three sort of sections or three main points we want to hit. First one is I'll ask Luk, and then Ash, you and I will chime in to explore a bit how the buying of services has changed. Maybe again, right, following the pandemic. So where is it now? How does it function today? Then we'll dive a little bit into what that means for business development and like the consulting practice does it and the marketing the firms run. And then following that, we will discuss a little bit what does it mean for you in practice? Like what types of decisions should you be making? What types of systems should you be building inside your consulting practice, or if you're on the marketing side within your marketing team to work the practice.
Yeah, and Flo, just to add on, we have spoken about some of this before if you've listened to some of the episodes, but this time we're just going to give a slightly different flavor and talk more about it so that you can ask us questions.
And Luk, we'll give the stage to you because how service buying has changed is very near and dear to your heart, right? As a huge part of the rationale. I don't know, this is me putting words in your mouth, sorry for that. But it seems to be an important driver of why you even founded your own firm, your own consulting firm in the first place, right? Yeah. So maybe you can walk us through some of the
after your
things.
Official start, or is it already?
I already did the official start.
Right.
So we've been recording this all the time. So
sorry
you're good.
For that.
No worries.
I've now interrupted.
All good.
Just keep going.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, I know. So maybe very, very short from a background standpoint, I'm helping other consultants, so consulting consultants or consultancies, and I'm doing that actually. So you can look at consulting business development from what you might call the collective standpoint or the collective point of view, which is more at the brand or at the consultancy level. Or like I'm doing, looking at the expertise voice, so the collective voice versus the individual or the expert voice. So that's the terrain that I'm working at. And what I'm doing actually is helping consultants, partners, owners, individual consultants build a stronger reputational footprint so that they can organically grow their consultant revenue. Yeah, so it's all about creating a reputation in the market so that prospects and clients are coming to you, we won't go there, but which happened to me in my consultancy in the past. So we never had to sell anything. We always had organic pipeline of prospects coming to us. And that was done through that very strong reputational footprint in the market. Yeah. So that is what I'm doing, helping those consultants building that reputational footprint. Now, to keep a long story short, there is and there was a lot going on already before Corona, but Corona kind of amplified, accelerated some of those trends. And I would say, and I've been writing a lot about that in the past months also, I'm currently also through research that you can find in many places about consulting and consultancy business development. There's actually 4 trends that you can spot in all the markets, and again amplified by the Corona period, of course. So the first one is actually the complexity of topics is increasing. And also, like Ash already said, so the volatility of these and the changes in all those hot topics is also changing, and the speed overall of all these topics is changing a lot. So it has really increased. Just to name a few, it's like cybersecurity or all the supply chain consultancies, they are doing extremely well. You have hybrid working. So I could maybe list, and I've been listing a few of those in my posts in the past weeks. So I could maybe list 10 or 15 like hot topics that are growing substantially and really changing also the way that consultancy is developed in the market. Now, so that's first trend, complexity that is increasing in almost all organizations. So the second one is the buyer behavior. I think we've all been reading a lot about that. So buyers are, if you compare them with like 10 years ago, today a buyer does 80-90%, depending on the research that you're reading, but buyers are doing their homework, their research, 80-90% before they get in touch with the consulting firm to get the support. So it's extremely important that you get, as I always say, included in the homework of the buyer who does the research to find a solution for the problem that they are faced with in the organization. So that's second thing. Third thing is that apparently, and that is again also amplified by Corona, is that the whole trust issue. Of course, there is already since many years the whole trust issue. That's also why Google changed algorithm many times already. There is a trust issue in general. So with all the fake news and everything that's going on there, but apparently through research also seen that trust in consultants is going down. So the trust objective, and so from a consultancy business development standpoint, building trust is becoming more important, and it's something that in business development activities need to be taken into account. And of course, that leads into, and we'll come back to that later on, sharing more expertise so that people can start trusting the expertise. So third thing, trust. And last but not least, of course, we all know that there is a capability issue. At one hand, there is a complexity issue. The speed is going up. So, but also organizations are now confronted with, oh, wow, with all these complexities like cybersecurity, supply chain, we don't have the internal capability, we don't have the internal resources to deal with all those complexity. So let's look outside. Now consultancies, of course, also getting into hiring troubles because they get a lot of requests for those particular hot spots or hot expertise domains. But there is an overall, let's say, shortness of capability and expertise in the organization. So that's driving, in general, the way that we look at business development these days. Flo, I don't know if that's an answer to your first question.
No, I think that's great stuff, because the points you made here with this is a disconnect we also see, right? The demand is still high. This is what you talk about when you say complexity also. So it seems like consulting services are in high demand, but at the same time, since the game has changed in terms of how these services get bought, how the discovery is done, right? And the number you mentioned, we've been reading that for years. Like people want to find stuff online. They want to make buying decisions on their own time, all that stuff. I think your point is fair to say after COVID, it's finally here. It really has hit the consulting markets as well. And we still see firms who are, they've gotten it 2 years later, right? But some are still struggling, shifting to the digital.
Yeah, so you can see, and I won't go into all the details, but just as an example, so you can see firms that started like 2019, 2020, even like in the middle of Corona, can grow into from zero to, I've written a case study about it a few weeks ago, So from 0 to 120 people and 40 million revenue in 2 years because of their extreme reputational digital footprint.
They get the digital marketing aspect, right? Like on the basis of a strong consulting offering, I know which case you're referring to, but so they have a differentiated point of view and a differentiated offering, but they also have this digital marketing game down. Two specifics, I think, or three maybe, and Ash, you can chime in. I've seen in terms of just the marketing. So the social media stuff is really on a slight change in playbooks on the digital marketing side, right? This old lead gen game, like I put a white paper out, I collect an email address, I hit people with emails. It's a little bit on its way out, not sure. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think even before that, what's essentially happening is there's a content explosion. Like when Luke was talking about trust, there is content on every front.
That's true.
We're kind of being overwhelmed with the amount of things that we need to consume in terms of it, that we don't know what's the right channel, as a consumer, as the user, the professional services, end users. So there's also the arrival of content-free content, because people are just putting like sound bites, you have podcasts,
content-free content, yes. True.
Yeah, this is exactly what you've been saying, Flo. So I'm just like, reiterating that specific, aspect. And when you're touching on the lead gen thing, I just want to like reiterate, I think we spoke about it like a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Marketing throws in a lot of leads. These are not necessarily good for sales. It's just like, hey, I need some leads for an event, for an email marketing campaign, for something like that. They're not they are market qualified leads, but they're not qualified with intent. So essentially, you just give all of this, the sales, say Bizdev and sales teams just basically look at it and are like, all right, who should we focus on? Yeah. And essentially, you get some really, really low conversion rates just because, well, it's not effective. And you kind of need to like focus on the intent and demand there so that they can build a supply. I think we've been talking about the demand and supply thing quite
and I think that there's the pressure to produce quality stuff, right? I think we'll get to that a bit later on. That's just huge. So I'll mark this, we get back to it. But two more things I see or have seen, because of the buying gets more digital. And that's not just people browsing your website or learning about you. It's even in the buying process, right? Instead of, you don't have actual meetings, you have Zoom meetings like this and so forth. What I've heard, especially from firms that sell to enterprise clients, is that the committees get bigger because the cost to just for this meeting, like if it's a bunch of people here, add 2 more people into the decision-making process and have them look on as the consulting firm pitches, right? That costs nothing anymore. Right. So I've heard that a lot, that the number of stakeholders, especially in the large deals, going up. Right. That's another consequence of buying becoming more digital. So that for marketing, that means you have to influence more people, just sort of putting it that way. And another thing, and I've just seen this, I put this in the show notes. I've just seen a study that was put out by the guys at Dream Data. They do it's an attribution software tool, so they attribute revenue to marketing touches, and they crunch their own numbers across their clients, and they figured that the average sales cycle for B2B high ticket items, so 5-6-figure software deals or consulting, is now around 191 days sales cycle time, and it has on average, now that's a dangerous average because the tail ends vary, but 31 marketing touches before it closes. The point there is, I think that's a huge change also in marketing. So stuff gets digital, there's more people involved, and there's a lot of touch points. So you need to be able to sustain that. And look, to the point where I see firms struggle in the digital world. If you need 30 touches and your firm puts out one LinkedIn post every 2 weeks, that's not going to be enough. So flight to quality, but the high frequency and the consistency, I think, is also something.
And that's why it's helpful. That's at least what I've experienced when I'm working with consultancy firms, is that you look at it from a double angle, which is the collective angle, which is the firm. It's of course also called the brand, but I don't like the word brand. So at the brand level, but there's also like the personal brand, which I also don't like at all. So I call it the collective voice and the individual or the expertise voice. And if you look at it from both angles, it's very helpful in tackling what you just described. So expertise is easier at the individual level to share in a more sustainable, reliable, consistent way over a longer period. And it's also, there is not a lot of research yet on that, but it's also extremely powerful when companies are looking at solving their problems and they're starting doing the research and you have all those touch points and all those people involved, is that you have an expert that you can put in the front line, like it happened to myself. So, and we never had, as I already said, we never had to do any sales because we were contacted because of the expertise that we have been sharing all the time consistently.
And just for people, for context, I think, Luk, you're referring to the time when you were working at Deloitte, leading a people analytics team or group, whatever. And because due to Luk's history before that was he had a startup in this space. So he was a very visible expert on just people analytics, data-driven HR functions and so forth. And I think the point you're making is that often that can be the difference. If you're in a competitive bidding situation, the team that has the most visible experts on them win, because honestly, there's feature parity between the consulting services. Like just to pick on names.
Feature parity, there is no difference anymore. I've been pitching against all the big four and even the management consultancies, and I've been winning many times because we were considered as the experts, because when they looked at us, we had an abundance of expertise and particularly focused on successful case studies from referenceable clients. You know that I'm using that word more often. So we had a very strong referenceable client list, and those typical studies, case studies, were the driver of success. And that's...
Can I, just for the benefit of people who haven't heard the previous episode, can I ask how many case studies you turned out in your time? Because you said that in the last podcast, but I think it's worth saying again.
Was that? Are you asking me?
How many? You had a specific number of how many case studies you
almost
shipped.
150.
So just to make the point again of the many touches, the high frequency and so forth, you just have, your firm has to build some kind of content. Sorry for the word, but content machine.
Absolutely.
Quality is important, but I often find that the consulting firms I work with, they have the quality of thinking. That's there. They struggle to put it in front of people with a frequency that makes sense. And I don't want to make that joke all the time, but there is many firms, if you scroll through the LinkedIn feeds, there's like 2 posts a month, and to your point, Luk, no individuals posting. Or just one or two.
Not. So a little bit at the collective level and nothing at all at the individual or.
And that's not how it flies. And maybe to round it out, Ash, sorry, you can follow me, but my last point to wrap this section before we maybe pause for questions. On that point, I think, because I referenced LinkedIn a bunch of times, social media, we mentioned the change of playbooks. That's just the big gorilla now in terms of channels. That's also a recent change, right? I think that's very much important. And yes, I have clients asking me, oh, it seems like it's now highly competitive, or do people even enjoy LinkedIn anymore, blah, blah, blah. Yes, there's more competition in those channels, the social channels, but there's still the best thing you can do, my perspective on right now. Like your LinkedIn feed, as much as you might think it's competitive, still by far not as competitive as SEO for the terms you're trying to hit, like digital transformation advisory in Germany or something like that. So it's still, for me, social media as the top of the funnel channel is where the game currently is one. That's not saying it's the only thing you can do. It's just saying that it's no longer optional.
I mean, Flo, to add to that, I think you need to say that what you should use these channels as a tactical conversation space, and build playbooks around it, but also
not just a megaphone. That's true.
And also, as we are talking about it, it seems what's more and more relevant right now is essentially marketing and Bizdev coming together to have a steer code for Bizdev, to make sure, because there's so much going on, there's a little bit of steer needed to make sure that you're effective in what you're trying to sell.
All right,
go ahead.
And Luk, did you have one last point, or should I just?
No. If maybe we can ask
So if anyone has questions, has their own insights about stuff that has changed recently, so to speak, and by recently I say like the last for sales cycle, I don't know, the last 2 years maybe, but that would be our overview. You can either come on mic and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat or whatever. We're happy to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, that is also okay. Awkward pause.
I can ask a question. Hi, guys. Great podcast.
Hey, Kira.
It's Kira here. Agree on LinkedIn Flo and agree on quality content, which is actually not cheap to produce either. Not all the audiences are on social media. Like if you work with manufacturers and stuff, they're not necessarily there. So the question is around, be that either influencer marketing or digital PR. I don't know what exactly that is, but how to tap into the right networks that have your potential audience for consulting, not in a sales way. And so that you could prioritize those either channels or networks, because there are so many. And if you try to tackle those one by one, it's just not scalable, and you get discouraged quite easily because like you tried 5 different, spent a lot of time, nothing worked. Probably these are not the right ones. You haven't done the research. So that's where I get like totally lost.
But I love that question. Luk, do you want to?
Yeah, I can maybe say something about how I went about that in the past. And so, Kira, you're saying it's not scalable. When I'm working with consultancies, and what happened, of course, and I will give the example of my own consultancy, and then as a division within Deloitte, because we got acquired, is that if you really dive deep, you don't have to scale that much. Like in our case, we had like 200 target clients, and that was it. So that was, I'm talking Benelux now. And so we were in contact with all of them. We had of course, they were following me because I was the one sharing all the case studies and the experiences from the front line through my LinkedIn account. But at the same time, all those case studies and all our experience, every time when we had new trend, new thing going on, a new case study, that was nurtured through them, through our email list. And I always make a lot of fun of this, but I didn't even have an email system within Deloitte. So I used my own Outlook account, and I had my 200 target clients in my list. So, and I was sending out my nurture stuff, and I did that twice a month, more or less. So it was like below the radar, but I was the connection with my targets, or with my ICP, as they call it in marketing. So your ideal clients was extremely strong. So I kept nurturing them. And every time when I send out a new case study, I was contacted by 2, 3, 4, 5. And that was fantastic from a scaling standpoint. I didn't need that much. And when I'm working with other consultancies, and I work with those practice leaders or the experts in a larger practice, and I dive into detail, they also telling me, yeah, I have like 35 target clients in my country or in my industry, and that's all. And so personally, I'm not like, oh my God, you need to scale and scale. So there's a lot of debate on scaling. Of course, if you look at it from an Accenture like Ash, from a global standpoint or a European standpoint, then that you might get nervous. But if you look at it from a business development, from the field, from the front line, it's not always that difficult to scale.
And I think, Kira, you also asked about the appropriate channels, right? And I can add to that. So, Luk, I think you mentioned a sort of direct outreach through email, which that's nice. That's fine, and I think it still works very well, especially if you have.
I'm a big fan of email.
Yeah, I know that. But just on the comment you made there, Kira, regarding to LinkedIn. It might be true that the decision makers and your prospects are not on it, but in my experiences, chances are very high that many stakeholders inside their company are. So I wouldn't underestimate the effect of, to make an example, me seeing something on LinkedIn and just forwarding it or lifting it into an email, shooting it to Ash if it's interesting enough. So the hard part is to have something interesting to say that's relevant to your clients. That's the hard part. Then in terms of the channels, I would almost say, try one or two until you get it working. And if the production process is, I create stuff on LinkedIn to see if it gets liked, shared, seen by people who, even though they're not the right decision makers, they are in the industry. So now I have feedback that apparently it seems to be resonating in the industry. But you mentioned construction, right? And then once you have that going, you could start taking the content. Luke, I don't know what your production process is, but you could do sort of LinkedIn first and then see what you can salvage from the production process there and maybe use in an email or something like that. And since you mentioned PR, and that used to be one of my hats I had in consulting land. Used to be you build a story and then you pitch it to media outlets, right? You run 80 pitches, you get nothing, then eventually one comes back. I recommend the complete opposite. I said, don't write the pitch to journalists, write the content on LinkedIn, see which one resonates, and then pick that. Or other effect, which a client of mine just had, 2-3 months in, if you have interesting stuff to say, the reporter might find you because they're also scouring the LinkedIn feeds and they are looking for content. And it might be like, if you produce social first, you have an interesting body of work to repurpose, which is different from building a huge PR pitch, right? Sending it to 100 outlets, doesn't get pickup. So all the work was for nothing, right?
So
of course you could find a twist on that, but that's the idea, I think.
Kira, I also don't agree that those so-called executives are not on LinkedIn. Because they are, but they're probably not yet following you or maybe not aware of whatever. But when the moment comes that somebody is doing research and you have nothing there except for, here's a picture of the weekend in the forest with the team, then I think you are like in place number 2 against the other one who's sharing content, who is an educational focus person, expert at the expert level. And so you will lose against the expert sharing savvy consultant if you don't. So if they don't find anything meaningful and I would say that they can trust, because it's all about building the trust in your expertise to solve the prototypical problem of the client, then of course you are far from getting the deal.
And I just want to add that back when I was running an ad firm, one of the things that I used to focus on was word of mouth adjacency. There's always a channel, whether it be social, whether it be a community, whether it be Reddit, whatever. There's the word of mouth adjacency, because these are the people, they may not be the C-suite executives, but they are the whisperers. And I used to target them with bite-sized kind of information that they can literally like start talking. Essentially, the whole thing I was trying to do then was just build word of mouth. It was effective primarily because we had to identify these people in the community to build that up. And so it can exist on LinkedIn. It may not exist on LinkedIn. We can't really guarantee that because it depends on sectors. But sometimes these people are on Facebook, for instance. Sometimes these people are at a convention. And those adjacent people are the ones that I targeted rather than the direct C-suite.
Yeah, so it's not an either or, it's an and, absolutely.
Did we help at all, Kira? Because I think...
that's helpful, because of the focus, and Facebook, I agree, because I am actually working on both content strategy, something meaningful, and social media, because in my area, YouTube, I will be last, more or less. It's hard to compete, although that works for the competition, but LinkedIn and Facebook should be relatively easy to conquer. And that focus helps, and then definitely SEO. So that will be my focused, I guess, and then I'll see what's next.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna use this as a segue, Kira, into your next sections, because we're watching the time, Luke and Ash. Maybe we can fold the next 2 points together and just talk about what needs to be, what it means and what needs to be done. Because I think, Kira, you touched on a point which is essential. Because of those changes in the market, because of it's becoming more digital, more complex, some of the channels we mentioned are more crowded. I think the essential part, and we referenced this, and Luke, I want you to talk about this, is that going forward, you will not have a chance if you cannot have a very clear focus on a specific segment. Luk, you mentioned you just had 200 clients as your market, so to speak, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, about the how the hard part, I guess, is figuring out the focus, the positioning, and the what do you say? And then, yeah, to Kira's point, the channels can still be tricky, but it's usually gets much easier once you have that first part done, right? The focusing dialed in.
Yeah, so the whole focus thing, of course, maybe stepping back, it's when I talk about business development, I always say business development is rooted in educating your target audience. And the education, of course, is about the problem resolution that the expertise is all about. So you share, you educate your target audience about about solving the prototypical problems that they are faced with in a day-to-day setting in their organization. But you, of course, if you're like spread too thin and you're like, I don't know, like consultancies calling themselves end-to-end or like a one-stop service, whatever shop, then of course it's extremely difficult to be that educating expert. So that's of course why focus is extremely important, and that is the starting point of everything I do when I start working with a consultant or a consultancy firm. The first thing that, of course, trying to understand is how focused they are, so that in the second phase, they can start educating the target audience about the expertise and building the trust, of course, in the market and their reputational footprint. So the focus is then about, and of course, you can have a consultancy firm with several focus domains, but each domain needs to be focused and needs to be linked to an expert and needs to be linked to a process, needs to be linked to leading thoughts and a point of view about that particular expertise domain. So it's not like you need to throw away everything that is already in the consultancy. That's impossible. But the streams or the practices of expertise need to be defined in the best possible way. And that's, of course, through positioning exercise, where you define who is the target audience, what is the prototypical problem of such a target audience, and what is exactly the expertise that we have that can be linked to the problem resolution of that target audience. So, and if you don't do that, then of course you're like, then what I'm seeing, and you know, Flo, I've been writing about this a lot. So you get more into a service firm where you are output focused instead of being an expertise firm. So the starting point should be the expertise and the outcomes that you can deliver, instead of a service firm that does activities and delivers output, mostly at a lower level, lower value level, lower rate level, versus the expert firm, well-positioned, well-defined, and more outcome-driven, which is very different from a language standpoint. So problem resolution, outcome-driven language is different than the output or activity language. So that is a very, very big first change or starting point for a consultancy firm.
Yeah, and because we had the second section was supposed to be what has to change. So nailing that focus on a segment and identifying the problem, right? And then getting clarity, I think, look, what you said is what is the outcome we deliver? If that's our target audience has this problem, what is then the outcome we deliver? As opposed to, oh, we do this and that and this type of work.
Consultancies,
right?
all those consultancies saying, here is what we do. And what I'm always trying to get them to is to say, here is what we can achieve. Or in a client-centered language, that they say, here is what you, so the client, can achieve. And that is a different mindset from servicing to here's what can be achieved.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, Ash, I think if people were to visit your website, Luk, because I know like your website starts with, oh, consultancies often have this problem. I think that's prototypical for the approach. Is you got to talk about the client problems first, and then you have, of course, you have to have a strong point of view and interesting answers to how do we solve that then. Yeah, that's where it starts. Sorry.
So
Ash.
It's always the same thing. So let's not go into the website discussions, because
don't
let's say 99% of consultancy websites are, excuse me, crap. But what you do is that you are immediately clear about who's your target audience, what is the problem that they typically faced with, and what is the problem resolution that you are delivering to them, or you can deliver to them. And then of course you have immediately your point of view, so setting the context, and then you have immediately referenceable case studies or testimonials, and then of course at the bottom you have your content or your leading thoughts about that problem resolution, not like any kind of content stuff, but about, so again, the educational component, teaching the target client about the problem resolution that they can, but also things like what is the cost of inability, what's the process that you have to go or can go through, and so on and so forth. But all of it is audience pain, audience problem resolution linked. And that's visible on the homepage, must be visible on the homepage immediately, bang.
Yeah, no, fully agree with that. Look, we need precision marketing. And in order to get that kind of precision marketing, the marketers themselves need to move to a different kind of role to give the right kind of advice, more of a business partner role. Sales eventually, I mean, sales is ultimately king because that's what's primarily driving revenue. Yeah. Marketing is supposed to be like the axle grease that kind of helps sales drive that revenue. So if there's no laser focus in that, and if you don't focus on like service delivery, or and build those right capabilities to make sure that you market everything effectively, it's just going to be a lot of noise. And that's why I think we need to start with stakeholder management. I think I always talk about that, but Flo, you can or Luke, you guys can talk more this time.
Yeah, no, but I think you're making the point about like Luke, I think bringing this back to our agenda, right? What does it mean for business development? So I think, look, what you're saying is you got to dial in the focus, and you got to really understand the pain points, and you got to speak to those. And then Ash, I think what we were going to say for the marketing function is the marketing function, if you're in a larger firm, if you have a team that works with a practice, you should push to get to a place where you can help the business do that, right? You should be able internally to take an advisory role, challenge the guys in the business to nail it down. I bring any expertise you have. Ultimately, they have to make the decision, because let's face it, you are not the owner of the consulting firm. You don't run it. So these are business decisions. They have to make them. But I think marketing in firms, that needs to change. They have to be much better at helping with this type of work and saying, that's not, the focus isn't narrow enough. It's not clear enough. We're not talking to the pain points yet, like these types of things. Working on the inside towards, to your point about the website, right? Look, making sure the business makes the decisions that and result in a better website, because honestly, that's where it starts. Like marketing can do copywriting and design forever. It will never be a good website if those details Luke talked about aren't dealt. Yeah. And I think to your point with the channels, Kira, you'll never get a LinkedIn strategy to work that's just the same. Like there's tons of firms who do post quite frequently, like lots of them. Oh no, it's not too many, but they exist. Sorry, it's that way. But it's not working because they have the same issue. They haven't dialed in the focus. They're not talking to the client pain points. They just have a whatever post up every day. Well,
and because they are not into this sharing the problem resolution linked to their expertise and their target audience, because that's not clear, then what they start doing, because of course they have like, I need to be on LinkedIn. And so they start sharing stuff. They either share stuff from others, or maybe a Harvard Business Review article, or they share like the event from the past weekend. So I call that activity sharing. And maybe have the hiring in between. So we have a vacancy here and there. And so that's activity driven. And what they need to learn is to switch that to business development driven. And that's a very different approach. So that's all about this, the educational component of business development. And that's what's missing in all those consultancies.
And that's exactly why you need to have your narrative down right from the beginning. And that's where managing different groups within the firm to build this cohesive narrative comes first, and then all the activities are messaging driven, which is fine. It needs to be a click down, focus on that. But if it doesn't have that tree narrative, you're just putting noise in the market.
Yeah. And it is important that the narrative is client-centered. So as I always call it, outward looking instead of inward looking, because, and Flo also talks about that regularly, is most consultancies, because of this, it's not clear. So they are service oriented, they are output oriented, and then they say, we do this, we have that, we do this. And so it's we show. It's about them and not about the client. And like we just discussed, if you have a website like we have been talking about a few minutes ago, then that's an outward way of looking at the expertise. So it's a client-centered way where you say, we know that you have this kind of prototypical problems, and here are ideas about, and so here's how we can go about, and so on and so forth. It's an outward way of looking at the expertise.
Yeah, and I think a good method to try and do that, to force that shift. By the way, that's a prototypical tip. If you can formulate questions that start with, "Are you struggling with X?" Yeah. I'm not saying that leads to the perfect solution, but that's also a helpful exercise to get the consulting, the business colleagues out of the inside out view into the other way around. To make a very specific example, lots of consulting firms talk about how they help with digital transformation in manufacturing, and they have all these services. A better way of phrasing this would be to ask the client, are you struggling to deliver on the promise of a digital factory? Right? And then we can talk about why you've bought a bunch of technology that doesn't work together. Your project's going to, you could immediately start talking about the problems the client face, hopefully in words which they themselves would use. And then that gets you to where I think, Luk, you were saying we need to go. And then that, by the way, that makes for interesting content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually, if you look at it from this chain of audience definition, typical or prototypical problem resolution of the audience, then your point of view about it, setting the context, and then creating your value proposition. So let's say the problem resolution activities that you're doing, outcome driven, then it's actually easy to write about that and to create content. And because people also are asking, you have written 150 case studies, how the heck? So they don't understand. But that was because of the focus, and of course the all-day activity in the front line, and being aware of the fact that your business development, your success of the consultancy is linked to sharing your expertise with clients who have been and gone through similar activities to solve their prototypical problems. And so I always struggle a lot with consultants saying, I don't know what to write about. For me, it's almost like I just don't get it.
Yeah. And we've said this on the podcast before, right, Ash, to say, and I think, Luk, you said it when you were on your first episode here, the trick is to just take the advice you give in consulting, run it through some sort of editorial process, and then that's the content, right? Sorry, let me flip that. If you start with the actual client problems you solve in your daily work, you write about those problems, and then you write about how you solve them in your firm. Well, it shouldn't be too hard to find content, which you then can massage, because that stuff should already exist. You've already created pitch presentations with arguments. You've already written consulting playbooks. I don't know. Case studies, to your point, Luk, lots of consulting firms I know write sort of internal memoranda or project reports, which never go anywhere, right? You could pick those and salvage, turn them into, there's always approval stuff and so forth to take care of. But the raw material usually exists within the consulting practice and the day-to-day business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You even have emails going back and forward with your clients. So what I'm doing today in my work is also anytime when I've sent a mail to a client this morning, so I immediately copy paste that mail and put that into my content folder, because that's let's say a micro case study that I can use because the client asked the question, so I answered the question, and that's a micro, like maybe LinkedIn post that I will use in the coming weeks as content to share, because it's an interesting question from a reader, or in this case from a client. But I'm always focused on, switched on to spot opportunities of content.
Yeah.
for content.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the third section we had here, right? What types of systems would you have to build? I think on the highest level, that to me is just the message, is that the silos between the marketing team, the business team have to come down. Difficult, who swings the hammer to bring them down. But I think the idea is that the insight into clients and their problems and the specific thinking that resides in the business, that resides in the experts, right? And they might need a little help with turning it into content, publishing it regularly, right? Maybe enforce some discipline on themselves, because I get it. The main challenge is those consultants, they have to do the work, right? And then write the link, but it's difficult to do. So, but these are things marketing could help with. But that's a completely, I think, different model, because typically right now, the way it's set up in most firms is the business does the business and then marketing does whatever. And this is not a joke. I've talked to many partners who do not even know what their marketing team does by and large, other than run a couple of events. Whereas in reality, it should be very much the way like Luk just described. The expert is fully aware of the marketing needs and the marketing plays at the company, writes an email to a client and thinks, oh, that could be good content, and then this process gets triggered. And the marketing team provides the scale, because that can be done, right? Luk, you take your own email and copy it in your content folder. Someone else in that system you described could then turn that into a LinkedIn post, do a bunch of graphics. But that doesn't have to be you. But the insight, the expertise does have to come from the front lines. And I think that's how it's got to be built going forward. Ash, sorry.
If you're going to like talk about it like some high level, it is basically market need translated into audience emotion.
Yeah,
that's essentially how you drive the whole thing. And market need comes in through the Bizdev and sales teams, because they are aware of the needs and the emotive.
The consultants work on it every day, right?
Yeah,
they have
exactly.
that stuff.
Yeah, and the emotive hit is where the marketing team can really play some good role, but they need to understand the market needs, and that's why the conversation needs to be there. And there's a constant education required between two groups. Without that education, you kind of struggle, because marketing needs to understand how to sell, and they need to understand sales, and sales needs to understand what marketing can do. It's not that you need that alignment from the start. If you don't have that alignment, you'll just come into a practice and you'll find like a sales leader saying, I need a marketing person, I need a communication person, but not understanding what. And the marketing team will just, as you said, keep doing what they do of like events and collateral and emails and just give them a bunch of leads, which have no strategic focus.
Yeah, and I think marketing can play a very important role. I in the previous podcast, I talked about it. I never had any marketing support. So all those things like how do you do positioning analysis? How do you sit together with the team and with all the people from the business to think about how will we design our service offering? What kind of design thinking are we doing here? Maybe, it's like value proposition design is extremely important, but also how to build the nurture machine. What platforms can we use? Is there an email system that we can use to nurture our audience, and so on and so forth? So maybe also how do we design the most appropriate case studies and so on. So that can all be like a process and support and design thinking that marketing can help us with, because otherwise, we're probably stuck into day to day, and marketing can help us kind of to level it up and to help us create new way of working.
And I like this perspective a lot. And you remind me of something, or I'd like to shout out something, because in mid-size and larger firms, this stuff sometimes already exists. Like when I was working at Accenture, I gave a bunch of trainings to MDs about, I don't know, storytelling or things, but that's the exact point. It's always like a bit of an extra, and it's the entertainment that gets sprinkled upon a 2-day CAL meeting client account leader meeting at the beginning of the year, right? So it's a nice thing. Marketing also does 2% of the time, whereas in reality, it should be a huge and very strategic and very central part of the machine, right? Yeah. Educating the business, like Ash, like you said, going into having those conversations and then helping people understand the modern process, how it's run today. And to your point earlier, Luk, again, with the email, which I just love the practicality of that example. Think about it. How often did you as a marketer go into a weekly, bi-weekly meeting with the practice and said, hey, guys, can we talk about the most interesting like concise advice in your email outbox from last week? Like, which emails did you send to, I don't know, resolve an escalation, answer a client question? Never, ever did I have those conversations, but they would be very worthwhile having, right?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get to your content that way, as opposed to saying, okay, who can help me build some slides on Lola for the next event? Like the typical stuff that happens. And to drive that point home, and I've said this before, I once did an assessment of how often, in the marketing practice, in the practice I work with, how often we used elements of client presentations on major wins, right? So someone pitched the client, did an initial workshop, and then won a big piece of business. How often did we use those presentations to build marketing content off of? The answer is never. The question is why? Because this is obviously someone has prepared a workshop with some decks, and this is not all client-specific stuff that's in that presentation. There's general market research, there's high-level recommendations, all like as a gold mine of things. But the business builds it, does the one workshop, maybe they reuse it later for business stuff. It never makes its way into marketing. That's such a huge inefficiency. Meanwhile, marketing is over here and builds a fancy conference presentation just for that one conference. Anyways,
Flo,
sorry, I'm going to stop myself.
Yeah, I have to let you know that we are almost at time, so I think we should be opening up to questions. Sure.
Yeah, that's all I have. So here's your opportunity. Thanks, Ash, to ask some questions, and then maybe we wrap it up at the end of it.
Yeah,
if you can.
All right.
I have a question to Luk, which ties more back to the previous topic, but because you talked a lot about LinkedIn and websites. I worked like a year ago with a LinkedIn expert, and she told me that websites are dead and only your LinkedIn profile is like much more important. So like when you post on LinkedIn, they only check out your profile and directly contact you. So how do you think about that? Or was it your experience as well?
Well, first of all, they will never contact you directly unless they have been following you and maybe they got whatever feedback from the network that you can be the guy to solve the prototypical problem. So they will follow you over a longer period, and that websites are dead is absolutely not the case because I would say there are even like gurus right now in marketing saying that the website is the core starting point of everything you do, because it's the content hub where you put all your expertise and it all starts from there. But it also like the hub for like weekly talks that you're doing, Q&A sessions that you're organizing, webinars that you're doing, it's all there. And it's the starting place. And I think that Florian can maybe also witness, because we are following a few of those people saying this, that the website is the number one place where your expertise demonstration is actually taking place. So I'd say if you're hearing that more often, I think that those people might be wrong.
Well,
no, I completely agree. But it was.
Let's say the first thing you do if you have a problem is you Google something. So depending on where you land, you then make your decision, or you start doing more research. And in like say 95% of the cases, you land on the website.
And I think to the point. So I think I'm always dubious when someone says, "Oh, you only need this," because, like you said, there's all these statistics: 191 days, 30 touches. It always has to be multi-touch, multi-channel. Sorry, I know it's a lot of work, but that's how it happens. I'll agree with that sense and so forth. That the initial awareness, like people reading your thoughts, right, reading your problem resolution ideas on LinkedIn, chances there are much higher than on your website. Like the blog as a major driver of initial interest, I would go there and say that is probably dead, because I have yet to see a blog post that performs as well as LinkedIn posts over time. So for the awareness game, LinkedIn's right. The website is not dead though. Its function has just changed. It becomes the archive and it becomes the conversion point, because the way I see the buying journey happen is, yes, I see you on LinkedIn. I see a couple of posts, 3, 4, 5. But eventually, like Luke said, I might get closer to the idea to actually buy from you. So now I want to know who works on your team, what's the experience, what are maybe prices, blah, blah. Where do I find that? Not on LinkedIn. So I search you, I go to the website. The other aspect, which I think is a bit underrated, is LinkedIn is only ever for today. If Luke posts something interesting today and I want to go back a week from now and find it, that's a I almost said it.
Yeah.
That's a pain in the neck to do it. So it's still, so that's also why I want to be clear about blogs. I don't say blogs are dead. I say the function has changed. The initial reading happens on LinkedIn. That's where you get all the reach. But the person who wants to come back, dive deep, really digest it, it's good if you have a blog where they can easily find it again 3 to 4 weeks later, because the LinkedIn post, the feed is always updating. So what I post this morning for my audience, probably gone tomorrow. So it's this idea of the outpost and the home base. And I think both are necessary and they're still very much viable.
Yeah, so I always say the best business development consultant or expert is a multi-platform educator.
Yeah. I mean, like, you have to see LinkedIn as your entry point, and your website is what gives you the authority. And like Flo was saying, it is a database essentially, but in a much prettier way.
And also, I think it's and then I'll close. But it's also interesting for mid-sized or larger firms. If I read some expert and I go to a website, what the website has is the opportunity to show the client the breadth of services. And Luke, I know we don't want to go too much services, but it's interesting. In a blog, I can see everything Luke has written about. Right? That's I can see a portfolio. I can see a body of work. I can see maybe some evolution of thought. Blah blah. It's all much more substantial than the fleety LinkedIn. But yeah, interesting.
So by the way, there's
perspective.
nothing wrong with services, but it can never be the starting point, and that's what is done wrong. Is that it's the starting point? So it should be a means to an end and not the end. Yeah. Marlene, is that you're answering your question because you asked me? Sorry.
Yes. No, thank you. It was answered beautifully. So
multi-platform. And I agree with what Flo said. Was very good.
Thank you.
And full transparency, just for my own, I have yet to hit a week where my website has as much traffic for the entire week than my LinkedIn posts on a Monday. It's sad. We're getting there, but it's the social media stuff is just powerful. Even if people don't click through or like, which they often don't, right? That's another element. Is they read it on LinkedIn, they never click through. So yeah, it's good to be in the channel. There's no doubt about it. But the website dead? No, I don't see it. Any other questions? Sorry.
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, hello.
Hi. To me, I run a small recruitment consultancy was focused on the professional services or the consulting industry. And I would like to know which channels. Can you tell me the 3 major, or let's say 5 major channels I should use to do proper marketing, to engage with my leads and to engage with my prospects, to make sure that they have valuable touch points. So can you mention 3 major channels? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to go first. For me, my answer would be just LinkedIn. You don't need 3. You probably don't need 5 even to start. I know Luke said multi-platform, but the reality is,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If you're a smaller
email,
firm,
for instance.
Yeah, true. But the one, so email is in there, right? He said 3. Look, so let's see. I would go LinkedIn first and hard. Why? Because if the audience that pays you, Binyam, are the recruiting firms, the recruiters, the HR people, right? And they have to be on LinkedIn. It's almost like a job requirement because that's where that's their hunting ground, right? So that's the easiest thing. Email, right, for the nurture and the follow up, and then just because, and Ash and Luke can disagree, but because this is a podcast, I would also maybe think about doing a podcast, not so much from the HR perspective, but in your business model is like a 2-sided marketplace, which that's interesting. If you did a podcast around, and I have no idea about this, about how do I get into a consulting firm, or how do I get out of it, or did you know the career angle for the talent, for the people side you are helping, that's valuable in 2 ways. A, it gives you a pipeline into the talent market, and B, if you have the podcast in your area that is among the top ones for people who want to work in consulting and have a career there, that makes you one very interesting recruiting agent for a consulting firm, because you already have the audience thereafter. So these are my three takes. So.
Hello, I would like to add Reddit as well in the consulting, because there's always plenty of people asking about jobs. They ask about jobs. They ask about like salary rates. They look at like opportunities. There are plenty of people literally
I love that.
all these questions there. Reddit is a key thing, and the other area is Glassdoor. These are two areas where you will find the talent willing to engage because they're looking to have an understanding.
Oh my God, that's such a good addition. In fact, Binyam, lots of ideas for this podcast come from me or Ash browsing on Reddit. There are subreddits. These are like threads in the forum. And there is one that is just Reddit/r/consulting. And there is people complaining about their jobs, asking about, was this a good raise or a shitty one? Like you can, to Luke's earlier point, understanding the target audience, the pain points, you can get all that there written out for you by consultants who need career advice and or all that stuff. So that's a brilliant one, Ash. Very good.
Great, thanks.
Good. Nothing to add.
We are over time though, Flo.
All right. So thanks everybody for those of you who are still here for joining this first live session. I had fun, so we should definitely do some more of those. Thank you, Luke, for joining us for this. And because this will be a podcast recording, before we close, I'll just ask if people want to continue the conversation, find more about your firm or all those posts by you we just mentioned, where should they go?
Yeah, I think you will add it to the show notes, I guess. But you've seen my name here, Luk Smeyers. So I'll switch off my camera, then you can, I think, see my name. So that's my name. So you can follow me either on LinkedIn. I'm posting on a daily basis, almost 5-6 times a week. And my website is thevisibleauthority.com. You can go there too with my blog and subscribe for my newsletter, which is case and reader question based.
All right. Thanks very much. So thanks again to the audience. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Ash. I'm going to stop the recording here. Have a nice rest of the Friday and eventually happy weekend.
Thanks for listening to Unbillable Hours. If you want more, tune in next week. You know where to find us.